Okay, let's just do this. All right? Let's just have the conversation, you guys. So, on my video, I did a community post on this. I didn't want to go for, I don't know how much you guys heard because you know my internet is tripping, but I didn't want to go back and forth with people. So let's have a conversation. I want to address all of the successful empires that Black people have had in the past 1,000 years. I am not going to discuss Axum. I'm not going to discuss Egypt. I'm not going to discuss any empires that fell before 1000 AD. I'm not going to discuss any of those. I just refuse. Now, I want to discuss all of the other empires, and there are not many of them because I made a statement and there were people who disagreed with my statement. I said, because somebody said, Black Man Rising, what's up to you, brother? Black Man Rising said, Irene, why would you say, we don't need to learn this history. We don't need to hear that Black people have been dominated for the past millennium because that's simply not true. And I said, well, it is true because our most successful empires all fell more than 1,000 years ago. And so it was him and it was one other brother that brought it up. And so I think what they were talking about, right? When they were disputing me is they were talking about the African rebirth period, what some scholars refer to as the African rebirth period. But I want to discuss this period and I want to discuss why I stand by my statement. And this is why I said it's really important that we understand history and not fetishize history because there's a lot to be learned here. So I'm actually glad that these two brothers brought this up. And I'm Black too. So, it's all of our history. Okay. So I don't have a dog in this race, right? If we win, I win. So I don't have a dog in this race, but let's talk about it. Okay. So I want, I want to start with the empires we can get out of the way real quick. Okay. The empires that we can get out of the way real quick. I want to start with the Songhai Empire because so many people are aware of that empire. We know they had a ton of gold. They literally crashed the gold market. Okay. So the first thing that I think is really important for us to understand is that this empire barely lasted 300 years. Okay. The empire, and I want to be really clear on this, the empire literally lasted about 200 years. 200 years. Our people were in slavery longer than that in this country. The empire didn't last but 200 years. The empire lasted, depending on who you want to go with, right? Depending on who you want to believe, somewhere between 1460 and 1590 or 1375 and 1591. Now, if we say 1460 to 1591, that's basically like not barely 100 years. I'm giving it 200 years. I'm willing to say that it lasted from the 13, the from like 1375. I'm going to put more on this. I'm going to put more on that empire than many people would. And I'm going to say that empire lasted 200 years. And you know why they only lasted 200 years? Because they were traitors. Because while the European was invading the entire northwestern coast or north eastern coast of Africa, while the European was invading all of North Africa, all of East Africa, and Southeast Africa, these people, the Songhai Empire, these people went and they defeated the Mali Empire. Now, when we talk about the Mali Empire, know this, that is an empire that barely lasted. That is an empire that barely lasted 300 years itself. It's an empire that empire was an empire that less time than our ancestors were in slavery in America. To put it in perspective, the history of the Mali Empire was shorter than our entire history of being in slavery in the United States. This is why I'm not going to get off this square. And you know how the Mali Empire fell? You want to know how it fell? While the European was invading one half of Africa, the Songhai Empire attacked the Mali Empire. That's how it fell. It fell because of black on black empire fighting, okay? We have European invaders taking over the entire east side of Africa. And the Songhai Empire thinks to itself, you know what I want to do? I want to go and tear down the Mali Empire. And immediately after, they went and conquered other groups of Black people instead of trying to get this land back. They didn't join forces and say, ooh, let's go over there. There's a lot of resources over by the Nile River. Let's go run these Europeans out. That's not what they thought to themselves. They started fighting each other. One empire caused the destruction of the other empire. Oh, we're going to talk about history today. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. If we're going to talk about history, let's learn about it. I don't want to just talk about that these people had all the gold and they crashed the gold market, and that's well and fine. I want to talk about why did these empires only last 200-300 years? Why did these empires last for less time than we managed to be enslaved in America? Can we talk about that? I want to talk about that. Before anybody comes for me and says I'm misrepresenting history and we shouldn't be saying that we were, dominated for the past, millennium, we were. We were dominated for the past millennium. And the reason is because we couldn't manage to go 200 years without infighting. Honestly, Ethiopia is the only African country that can really flex because the Ethiopian empire didn't disband until the 1970s. Ethiopia is it, y'all. That Ethiopia is the one. But let's just keep talking about it. So that's the Songhai Empire, that's the Mali Empire. The Mali Empire fell because the Songhai Empire, instead of them pulling together the way so many European nations would create treaties, instead of them pulling together to push Europeans out of the east side of Africa, the Songhai Empire attacked the Mali Empire, caused the empire to fall, and then while they were infighting, while it was black on black crime, okay, black on black war, the Moroccans came in and took over all that stuff. That's what happened. We couldn't even get it. We couldn't even manage to hold it down as long as white people held our ancestors down in America because of black on black fighting. Because we weren't hip to the game. While we were busy conquering each other, tearing down each other's empires, In a power grab, the Moroccans came over and took everything and shut the Songhai Empire down and absorbed everything that was left of the Mali Empire. That is real history. That is what happened. How are we going to compare that to all of the other kingdoms in Africa that are older than a millennium, that went on for thousands upon thousands of years? We're really going to say that Songhai, look, I'm not saying, I'm saying we need to learn from this. I don't mind talking about the Songhai Empire or the Mali Empire, but I mind talking about it as if these people were wise. They were not wise. That is why their empires did not last. You have empire for 200-300 years, attack while half your continent is being raped and pillaged. You want to start infighting. You want to start fighting each other because you didn't know that they had decided that we weren't human. And the next thing you look up, and Morocco has taken everything over, and now all of East Africa or all of West Africa are Muslims. You follow what I'm saying here? Like, this is the history of the thing. That's why so many slaves that came to America practice Islam. Steph Curry, where is the lie? Where is the what lie am I telling? Is that not how the Mali Empire fell? Am I lying that the Mali and the Songhai Empire both lasted about 200 to 300 years? Am I making this up? I stay promoting that we stop repeating our mistakes. That's what I stay promoting. I'm using how long we were in slavery as an example because those empires did not even last as long as slavery did in America, because people know and understand how long slavery went on in America. So when I say to people, those empires did not even manage to exist as long as our ancestors were in slavery, it puts in perspective how short lived those empires were. Where is the lie? I'm not making this up. Anybody can bet what I'm saying. When I say that the Songhai Empire attacked the Mali Empire while all of Eastern Africa was being invaded, that is historical fact. When I say that the Moroccans came in on the hills of the Songhai Empire attacking the Mali Empire and swooped up and shut their empire down and absorbed the Mali Empire, that is what happened. That is real history. That is history. And we talk about it because we must learn from our mistakes. Why can't we all get together, look at history, go, dang, that was a mistake, and not do it again? What is wrong with having this conversation? I'm so confused. What is wrong with having this conversation? Because we don't have anything else. If we talk about Benin, right? If we talk about the Benin Empire, which would be the other one, which is currently, right, a part of Nigeria. So everything that was part of the Benin Empire is in the area we now consider Nigeria. This is another situation. This is another situation where we saw that the empire was invaded and short-lived. Arguably, 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 we can say they were more successful than Songhai or Mali, even though they don't get much credit. They managed to last a little bit longer. They managed to break the 200 to 300 year mark. But honestly, if all you're going to give me is one empire that did not even actually last, for 1,000 years. How long was, who knows? How long was the Benin Empire? It was what? Was it 600 years? Something like that? I mean, heck, they did better than Songhai and Mali. I mean, they broke the 200 to 300 year mark. Let us be clear. After the invasion of the continent, we never reached that glory. We never had empires that went on for thousands of years again. It was done over a millennia ago. It just was. We can talk about the history, and all of those empires are amazing. But what we should really be looking at if we plan to advance our people is where we went wrong. Where we went wrong. Why do we have to reach back a millennium to talk about actual empires that were thriving? Why, in the period of the African rebirth, did two of the most well-known kingdoms of West Africa, Songhai and Mali, why did they not manage to last but 200 to 300 years? But the people that were taken as slaves from that part of the African continent managed to be in chains for longer. Because forget Egypt, forget all of the Sudan, Ethiopia, Nubia, forget all that. Most of our ancestors are from the other side of the continent. So let's talk about our ancestors, our direct ancestors. Let's talk about our direct ancestors. Let's talk about the empires that fell shortly before our bodies were transported out of Africa. Let's talk about how they barely lasted. They barely lasted 200 to 300 years because they were turning on each other, and how it left them vulnerable to invasion from Morocco, who ultimately absorbed those empires, and how on the heels of that, the slave trade was started both by the Muslims and the Euro-Christians. Let's talk about that, because that is the history, and we need to understand how we got here. If our people were consistently in the past millennium on point, then why globally are our people so downtrodden? Globally, not just in the United States. We can teach. I understand Black people have been torn down so much that our goal is we really want to uplift. We want to uplift ourselves. And I'm pro uplifting. There are many beautiful things about our culture. Many things I personally am thrilled that we have. Black people are the most humanitarian, the most likely to embrace, forgive. Black people have an aversion to perversion. Perversion is not a thing that is a part of our culture. We are the artists of the world, literally. Black people are the artists of the world. We dominate in every art form. This is why we excelled for so long in mathematics. This is why we excelled for so long in the sciences in the sense of not speculatory science, which is what Europeans have, where they just make up stuff like black holes and stuff that they can't prove exists, and quasars and stuff. And they're just literally just making stuff up, never seen it, don't have proof it exists, but they will literally get paid all this money to talk about something that they've never seen. Whereas Black science, traditionally African science, created inventions, created math equations that propelled architecture, There are many beautiful things that we can talk about. There are many beautiful things that we can point out about Black people. But we also have to focus on where we have failed. The question is, how do the most talented, humanitarian, mathematically oriented, how do people who are born with more intelligence than every other person on the planet, our children's IQs are naturally higher than every other person on the planet, how is it that so many of our people are wallowing in ignorance by the time they reach adulthood? There are a lot of positive things we can say about our people, but saying those positive things does not negate others. We are certainly, we are certainly not going to call an empire that honestly moved the way like the equivalent of a rapper today, dropping gold everywhere, no loyalty to the cause, no looking at the bigger picture. That was the Songhai Empire. That's why they didn't last for 300 years. They didn't last for 300 years because they were so busy flossing and not critically thinking about the fact, like, oh, half the continent is being invaded. Maybe that's a concern for us. While you had the Middle Easterns and the Europeans tag teaming one whole half of our continent, the Songhai Empire thought to itself, you know what we ought to do? Maybe we should go and attack the Mali Empire. Maybe we should tear them up. And while they were so focused on infighting and fighting amongst themselves, what happened to East Africa wore its way into West Africa, and they were conquered. That is the history. So if I say we have no Black empires, nothing even near the scale of what we saw throughout Nubia and Kush, nothing near the scale for what we saw throughout Kemet, I'm not lying. Nothing touches it. Nothing can touch empires that went on for thousands of years. Certainly not some little empire that only went on for 200-300 years and fell because they chose to turn on other people from the continent. Just like we turn on each other today. Just like we will sit here and we will fight with each other today. We can't stay focused. We don't know who's the enemy for real. We don't know what we should be doing for real. Just like we will be dripping in gold and punching each other in the face today, they were dripping in gold and stabbing each other then. And what's crazy is, do you know that the Songhai Empire, when the Moroccans came in, after they finished turning on the Mali Empire, they outnumbered and they were bigger and stronger than the Moroccan people. But they were so disjointed and so disorganized. They were so busy flossing with gold that their weaponry wasn't right. It's not that they didn't have the money. And I'm going to tell you something. This is a lack of strategic thinking, because over in the Kushite Empire, the Kushite people were known for creating weaponry. All of the weaponry that the Moroccans used to defeat the Songhai Empire was weaponry that was built for them or captured by them when them and the Europeans were rolling through Southeast Africa. And instead of the Songhai Empire thinking to join forces and make an allegiance with the Mali Empire and go to get and retain the land that had the metals that were being used to create the weapons that the people who conquered them ultimately used to destroy their empire, they wanted to floss with gold and attack the Mali Empire. They were on some petty stuff. That's the history. It was petty. It was petty. It was dumb. It was petty and it was dumb. It wasn't for lack of money that they didn't have weapons. It was for lack of intellect and strategic thinking. It wasn't for lack of money or lack of power or lack of an army that they managed to get conquered in 300 years. It's not any surprise that those of us who literally share a bloodline with these people, the American descendants of slaves, that's our bloodline. While y'all are always flossing for Egypt and all this stuff, these people are our blood. Our ancestors literally came from those lands, literally came from there. That is the blood that flows through our veins. We're just not going to learn any lessons from that behavior. We're just not, just because we don't like the conversation, because we don't want to hear that they went wrong anywhere. We're not even going to bother looking into why these empires barely lasted any time at all and why they fell. We're just going to just ignore that, right? Because that's negativity. That's being anti-Black. Like, of course, we can't talk about that. And it's no surprise because that's the way we are today, too. We can't talk about anything that's wrong with our community today, too. We can't say anything bad about our community. We can't say that anything needs to be improved in our community. You say Black on Black crime, somebody goes, well, everybody attacks their own people. Well, we're not talking about if they want to kill each other, fine. Why are we doing it to each other? Why are we infighting? Black YouTube is a perfect example of the Songhai mindset. Video after video of people just infighting, just a big old infight. Oh, we picked up some habits. Let's talk about the history. This is why I want to talk about history, because the same ignorance that caused them to fail is the same ignorance that's causing us to fail. How are you going to call somebody a winner when they lost? What the heck? That doesn't make sense. How are you going to call somebody a winner when they lost? All we can learn is that we know how to get our money up. We know how to get things together, but we don't know how to keep them together. We need to learn from the mistakes of our ancestors. Yes, there are many beautiful things about our Blackness, but us talking about what mistakes were made, because the failure was not in the good things, was it? Was the failure in the good things? Let me ask you something. Was the failure in the good things? No, the failure was not in the good things. The failure was in the failure. So if you failed and we're looking at ourselves today and we're not out here winning, maybe it's time that we assess what mindsets caused us to fail. And it never ceases to amaze me how we have very common mindsets to our ancestors when they were at their worst. Okay? Y'all always want to compare us to our ancestors when they were at their best. I could understand that if we were winning out here. We have a winner spirit, they had a winning spirit. But the reality is our mindset right now can be compared to our ancestors when they were at their worst, their weakest, their least analytical. Okay? And we need to look at that too. Because our weaknesses are the weak points. Our weaknesses are the things that need to be corrected. Nobody's out here trying to correct their strengths. So let's discuss our weaknesses. The thing is, I don't have low self-esteem as a Black person. So I don't need somebody constantly ego stroking me so that I can feel comfortable in my Blackness. That's what a lot of people want. You hate your own Blackness so much, you can't stand to hear anything said against it. You constantly need somebody to be calling you a king and a queen and ego stroking you and talking about the good old days because you're incapable of loving yourself without that validation. Well, I already love myself. I already love my Blackness, so I don't need to be ego stroked. I've moved on from the ego stroke, okay? I have moved on from the ego stroke. I want to talk about progress. I don't need my ego stroked to stand firm in my community. I don't need you to convince me that being Black is something that's worth it. I don't need you to try to tell me that we were great. I'm great now. I'm trying to get you to want to be great with me. Let's just be great together. How about we talk about all the things that went wrong so that we know not to double down on that? It's like the Black Panthers. Everybody's always talking about how amazing the Black Panthers were and ooh, the Black Panthers. Okay, that's cute. But can we talk about how they got infiltrated from the very beginning? They let some Asian FBI agent give them weapons, and how the government had their hands all up in the Black Panthers business from the very inception. The first guns they held were given to them by the government. Can we talk about that? So that if we get the revolution popping, we don't get infiltrated at the very tip top beginning of what we're doing the way that they did? Or are we only going to talk about their food programs? Huh? We only want to learn from the stuff they got right. There's nothing to be learned from the things that they got wrong, right? There's nothing to be learned. Is that how you approach life? None of us will be walking right now. When you see a little baby and they successfully do something and then they fall over, you don't think that they analyze, oh, this is what made me fall. If only I keep my balance a little bit better. You're not yelling at the baby. Don't focus on how you don't have balance. It's okay to not have balance. You just focus on the good things. We don't say that about anything else. When your car is making a funny sound, when you got a tick, tick, tick in your car, smoke coming out the tailpipe and stuff, you don't take your car to the mechanic and go to the mechanic and say, well, when they try to tell you what's wrong with your car, I don't want to hear what's wrong with my car. That's not the information I need. I need to hear about how my air conditioning works, how nice the leather on my seats are. So, sir, you don't want to know why there's smoke coming out of your tailpipe? No, I want to hear about how nice my paint job is. Nobody does that with anything else. Why are we doing that with our community? I'm so confused. Why are we doing that with our community? You want to hear about the paint job. You want to hear about the leather interior. You want to hear about the sound system. Meanwhile, there's this loud ticking sound every time you start up your car. There's smoke coming out your tailpipe, but you don't want to talk about that. You want to talk about the pristine, tint job you got on the windows. You want to talk about the new roof and how it opens and closes and how you've always wanted a convertible. You want praise on, how your car is, you bought it in X amount and you souped it up. You don't want to talk about the smoke coming out the tailpipe. You don't want to talk about the tick, tick, tick sound every time you drive down the street. But you're over at the mechanics. What do you want the mechanic to do? Do you want the mechanic to praise all the things that are working on your car? Or do you want the mechanic to speak about what's broken? Do you want the mechanic to talk about the good old days when your car was fresh off the lot and nothing was wrong with it? Oh, when I bought that car 20 years ago, man, that car was fly. Car was glossy, paint job tight, white walls just gleaming. Everybody was looking at me when I was driving down the street. Look, is this what we do? We don't behave this way with anything else. It's so illogical. It's so illogical. You don't want to talk about how to get your car back to its former glory. You just want to have pride in your car, so you only want to hear about the good old days when your car was spanking brand new off the lot. That's how a lot of you guys treat your Blackness. You don't like the Black you are today. You're not into the Black of 2021. You can't have any love for the Black of 2021, so you need people to gas you up with the Black from 1,500 years ago, the Black from 1,000 years ago, the 200-year empire that turned on some other Black people. You need that Black to be discussed. We can't talk about the Black today, can we? We can't do that. We can't talk about anything that's wrong. You only want to hear stuff that's right. To me, that is a sign of self-hate. While so many people are stressing with me, talking about, oh, well, it's negative. Look, I'm not negative. I'm real. The thing is that you feel uncomfortable. I don't feel uncomfortable because I already know that I am fabulous, okay? I see my skin, I see my hair, I see my features. I'm happy. I'm good to go. Every time a good song comes on, every time anybody's clothes look good, anytime anything gets invented that's worth having, a Black person did it. So I'm very happy. What I'm not happy with is seeing people with so much potential be at the bottom of the totem pole. Because, quite frankly, if the majority of us are at the bottom of the totem pole, believe it or not, it affects us all. So I'm more concerned with discussing the mindsets that keep us here. You know, the kind of mindset that had the Songhai Empire, instead of running over there and trying to go get control over the land that had the artisans that were creating the weapons, or get control of the resources where the metal was on the east coast of Africa. The Songhai Empire was trying to floss, drop gold here and there, show off, and turn on the Mali Empire. They were trying to do all that. And that's why they did not last for 300 years, okay? And that's why the descendants of that empire, i.e., you and me, managed to be in slavery longer than our ancestors managed to keep a working empire going. That is a problem. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the mindset, this genetic memory of ours, because our genetic memory is super on point. We retained all the good stuff, but we retained the bad stuff too. How many of you guys have seen personality traits in yourself and you're like, man, that's just like my mom? That's just like my dad. You see a personality trait in yourself, you're like, dude, I'm turning into my parent. It's a thing. That's a real thing. That can happen. That can happen to a whole community. That's why we have to talk about it. That's why we have to talk about it. Some of us are so damaged. Some of us are so downtrodden in our Blackness that anytime anybody tries to have a real conversation with us, we perceive it as negativity or hate. We need to get to a place where we love our Blackness enough that we can critique it without fear. When you're building, okay, let's say you build an application, you build a new app, all right? Do you want everybody just saying nice things about your app? Is that going to help you fix the bugs? Is that going to help you work the bugs out? Did you notice when I go on my Mac, when I'm on my Mac, if something goes wrong with my Mac, a little thing will come up and it will say, do you want to report this? Because Macintosh wants me to tell them when something is wrong. Because their goal is to create a better computer. Their goal is not to be uplifted and feel good because they're Macintosh. The thing that makes them feel good is when they fix their problems and they outshine the competition. I want us to view our Blackness like that, where we love our Blackness already, so nobody has to stroke our egos. We know what it is, okay? We know what it is. We already know what it is. What we need is I need that error report. I need to know. It's like error. Okay, well, tell me what went wrong so that I can address that. I'm trying to tighten this application up, okay? I'm trying to tighten this community up. I need the error report. I need to know where are we going wrong? Is there a pattern here? Let's look into the past. Is this some stuff we've done before? Maybe we didn't catch it. This keeps happening. Every time we do this, we're not progressing anywhere. Things aren't moving as quickly as we thought they're going to move. What is the problem? You know what? You don't need your ego stroked when you're that one, okay? You don't need your ego stroked when you're that one. You don't need to be gassed up when you own the gas station. I got the gas. I'm here to gas you up. You're not here to gas me up. I don't need to be gassed. The thing is that what we don't realize, y'all, what we don't realize is that you betray how you feel about your Blackness in your hypersensitivity. Now, I could see if I was an abusive person. I could see if I was an abusive person. Okay? I could see if I was an abusive person. But I'm just talking about history. And what do I always ask you guys? If you go look through my videos, if you go to my power playlist, what do I always ask you guys? I say, does what this person said, does it resonate into the modern day? Do you see this mentality in our people today? I always ask you guys that question. And so many will answer and say, yeah, yeah, I see that. And then my next question is, okay, so then what are we going to do about it? Because that needs to change, right? We see a consistent mentality and we can recognize that this is not good. So then what are we going to change? Look, the foundation is that we are better than this. Do I need to say that? Maybe I need to like openly say that. The foundation is that we are collectively better than this. That should be the basis for all of our conversations. That should go without being said. So then the question then becomes, how do we reach our full potential? Where are we lacking? Where can we be better? Where does our mindset need to change? Where do we need to not repeat the same things? Then that becomes the question. Because when you're building something, imagine if you bake a cake and you forget to put salt in it. Have you ever done that? I hate that. Okay, only women will understand this. Let me tell you, when you leave salt out of a cake, it does not taste right. Okay, all the sugar in the world cannot compensate for a teaspoon of salt. Salt just changes the flavor of the whole dish. So if I bake a cake and I bring it to the table and it's a beautiful cake and everything, and you eat the cake and the flavor is not right because I forgot the salt, and you go to me, look, the next time you cook, I notice that you continually don't put salt in it. Next time, you need to put salt in this. And I go, well, that's not the conversation. Look, okay. Anyway, y'all, my internet, I can't win out here with this internet in the middle of nowhere. But they're coming back tomorrow to figure out why my internet keeps hopping on and off and on and off. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. My point is that, and I think I really, and I'm not angry, y'all, but I think my problem is this. My problem is that we take offense to everything because we're so downtrodden that even constructive criticism won't work. And once we've reached the point where we can't hear anything, we don't want to talk about anything, we don't want to admit anything, it becomes problematic. So, to the brothers who had a problem with the fact that I was saying that in the past millennium, there have been no great Black empires. The closest thing is the Ethiopian Empire, straight up. Goodness sakes. Okay. Let's try this one last time. I really am going to have to end. Honestly, our love of being flashy, I'm not hating on it because I'm a very flashy person too. That's black for you. Like black people are flashy. Okay. Our ancestors were flashy. Just like our love of gold has been passed down for thousands of millennia. Okay. Or not thousands of millennia, but thousands of years for multiple millennia. Just how our love for the bling has been passed down, there's some other stuff that has been passed down too. Just like rhythm and dancing and musical prowess and fitness and beauty and all these things have been passed down generation after generation for thousands of years. There's some other stuff that has trickled down too. The Songhai Empire, they got their bling bling on, okay? They were dropping gold everywhere, jewels and stuff, but they weren't very logical because they could not see the interest in recapturing those parts of Africa, even though that is where all of the weapons for the greater Middle East and some European weapons, that's where they were cultivating their weapons. That's where the iron stores were at. They were so busy being blingy, they had a big old army that had no weapons. And at no time did they think to themselves, maybe we should go over there and capture or recapture or do something to get access to the place where all the weapons are being made. Over in East Africa, Southeast Africa, Central Eastern Africa. They didn't think about that. Instead, what they did is they got into a turf war with the Mali Empire and then left themselves vulnerable while they were busy fighting other black people. Morocco came on in and took them over. When we look at the Benin Empire, I mean, colonialism raped and pillaged everything that is the Benin Empire. It was literally a bloodbath. We know this because many of you, myself included, have that blood running through them because our people were scraped up and turned into slaves. So we know what became of it. We know what became of it. The only the only people standing were the Ethiopians. And they're financially selling out to China right now. I mean, their prime minister is literally selling them up the river. You know why? Because they're not watching for the old mistakes that our people commonly repeat that creep up and creep in. You know how Egypt fell? Let's talk about how Egypt fell. Egypt fell because they were not strong enough to defeat the Persians. Instead of making an alignment with those people from the Kushite part of Africa, we're talking Nubia and below, they tried to go at it by themselves. Instead of asking for help from people who founded them and ought to have been their allies, instead of looking to other Africans for help, they requested that the European come in to fight off the Persian people. And once those Europeans came in, they never left Africa. They never left. And the one time we could have had to reverse that, the rise of the Songhai and the Mali Empire, instead of them going and trying to gain access to the many resources and the artisans, because remember, they were experts in the lower Nubian area at making bows, at making metal weapons and tools. They were experts. They had iron stores, and everybody from all regions for many years thousands of years had been going to them because of their skill. And the Songhai Empire and the Mali Empire, instead of trying to go over there and make it all make sense so they didn't have a big, stupid army with the inability to fight because they had no weapons, they went and got into a fight with each other. No, there were no great empires in the past millennia. There were some flossy empires, some short-lived empires, some unwise empires, and that is why they did not last. That is why they did not last. That is why they only lasted 200-300 years. And I'm going to say it again because I really feel it puts it in perspective. Our ancestors were in slavery longer than those empires lasted. Straight up. And those empires are our direct ancestors. So there is a lot to be learned from them. I'm not trying to dodge talking about them. That's why I took my community post down, because I was just like, I'm not about to sit here and debate with people in the comment section. Right, Sin. I'm not going to sit here and debate with people in the comment section. I'm like, I'll just make a whole live. I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to dodge. I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to dodge the African rebirth period. Oh, believe me, I'm not trying to dodge it. There's a lot to be learned there, but it may not be what you're expecting me to talk about. It's time we get out of our feelings and just try to be greater, just try to be better. You want to learn from the good things our ancestors done. Why don't we look at their failures? Because their failures is why we are literally in America. Literally. Their failures are literally while we're in America. That mess that the Songhai Empire pulled with the Mali Empire is literally how our ancestors ended up in slavery. Like, for real. That is what started the slave trade. How dare, why would we say that? What is great about that? They were not wise. They were not wise. And let me tell you, those people suffered for it. The way the Egyptians literally begged the Greeks to come in and save them from the Persians is the way that people were begging to be saved from the Moroccans and the other Muslim people that came over into West Africa when the Songhai Empire thought it was a better idea to infight with other Black people than to get their minds right and go get those weapons and those resources that were being confiscated on the east coast of Africa. That mess was a mess. If you guys want to talk about that period, if you want to talk about the African rebirth, literally the baby came out the womb and got slaughtered before it could walk. That is the story of the African rebirth. It's infuriating, quite frankly, because all of the pieces to be great, all of the pieces for greatness were there. They were big. They were strong. There were lots of them. They had all the money. All of the pieces to be great were there. They had a massive army that could literally eat Morocco's army. When you are that great, the question is, how do you fail? We're not going to talk about that. When you are that great, how does your kingdom, how does your empire only last for 200 or 300 years? How do your descendants, people who share your blood, end up in chains for longer than you can keep your own empire? We need to figure that out, because if we're ever going to be at our full potential, if we're ever going to reach our so-called greatness, it's going to come from learning from their mistakes. They had every advantage, but they failed. They had every advantage, but they failed. We have no advantages. So you know that we need to be on point. We have no advantages. So not only do we need to be way more on point than they are, we cannot afford to coddle each other. We need to be loving toward each other, but firm and honest, unabashed in our approach to cutting out these cancers that keep us stagnated as a community. This is not the time for an ego trip, y'all. This is not ego trip time. If you don't love your blackest by now, you're never going to love it. Nobody needs to stroke your ego. We know what our people were. The question is, how do you go from being so great to completely falling? Because so many people will say the European empires fell too, but I'll say this to you, I can't tell because Europe controls the world. I dare say it's more that their empires morphed. They have morphed. We lost the battle. If you guys want to win the war, then you can't be afraid to assess where we went wrong on the battlefield. And that is all I'm going to say. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later.